question that we got from viewer was about the Australian Dietary Guidelines. So in particular to the Australian Dietary Guidelines, how relevant are they to me and should we be following them? So
to me, do they mean like to them as a person or as a dietitian, as a client?
No, so just as a client, essentially.
As a client.
Yeah.
How relevant, yeah.
So that's a very big, loaded question. It is quite a difficult one to answer. So I will try and do my best to do so. The Australian Dietary Guidelines are to pretty much provide advice around portions, serving sizes, and the relevance to a healthy population group is probably the key word. So most people in our population we would consider to be healthy. So they're disease-free, there's nothing wrong with them. They're generally in a healthy body weight. And in that respect, following the guidelines as per how many serves of fruit, veg, dairy, meat, grains, fats, etc. over the course of the day is certainly fine. I guess as we know, nobody actually sticks to eating the same foods every day, nor do they actually follow the guidelines. And there's been a lot of conversation through the media in relation to dietitians simply just relaying information, being sponsored, etc. And that obviously what we say in terms of, you should eat bread, dairy is good for you, meat's good for you, etc. None of that is potentially swayed by cuisine, personal preference, or any of the above. So in relation to it being a guideline, I suppose that's the point of reference in that it is a guideline for people that are healthy, that don't have any particular disease. In terms of weight management, I know with myself is that honestly, I don't eat the same number of foods across the day, and nor do I actually meet targets for every single food group across the guidelines. But if we lean towards eating, 5 serves of veggies a day, 2 fruit, a couple of serves of meat, dairy, grains, whatever, that we probably should be a reasonably healthy body weight. We've got minimal risk of developing disease. That is what the guidelines were about. We're well nourished, so we're meeting most of our nutrients as well. And ultimately, that's the key, is to maintain a healthy body, over longevity. So if a course of my life there's going to be something that happens to me, I get diabetes, or I don't know, I've developed osteoporosis, then obviously I might modify those guidelines to suit myself if I've got, a certain disease. But if I actually stuck to that, I'd probably be quite disease-free for the most part. It's a wide generalisation, but you would think that's the case. We know that only a third of the population are actually meeting their targets for fruit and veg every day.
Isn't it like 4%? Meet the vegetable target or something?
Well, I said fruit and vegetables. Okay. I didn't talk about veg.
Well, veg is 4%, or at least under 10.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously everybody knows that we should be eating them, but at the end of the day, nobody actually is eating the same quantity every single day, and certainly not 5 serves. Yeah. So, we know that that's obviously part of a healthy diet, and people say that the guidelines are wrong, but nobody actually sticks to them. So in terms of whether they're right for individuals, they would be if you're actually meeting the targets for most of those groups. If you've got intolerances, if you might have diabetes, if you've got heart disease, as I said, the guideline is for healthy individuals. If you're carrying excess weight, if you're underweight, if you exercise at higher levels than the normal person as well, then that's the opportunity for us as health professionals to provide you some advice around how you might modify those guidelines. And I certainly don't bring them out very often.
And boring.
Yeah.
Like if you start talking about that, people I can find on the internet, why am I coming to you to ask this question? Why are you giving me this regurgitated stuff?
But they're a good place to start.
They're a good place to start, but it's a guideline, not a script. So it's probably something that we talk a lot with our practitioners about. A lot of guidelines is that they are guidelines. That doesn't mean you have to follow them like a script every time. You need to adapt and individualize everything to the person that's in front of you. So as a dietitian, like Peter said, they're a good start, but then you got to use your clinical skill and judgment to then adapt them to that individual and the goals that they want to achieve, whether that is increased exercise performance, gain muscle, all of that. They'll be eating well above the guidelines. Someone weight management, they might have lower grains, they might have lower fruit.
And nobody knows them.
Yeah.
So in terms of where dietitians have actually fallen down, and maybe certainly our profession could pick it up, who actually knows how many serves of meat they're supposed to get each day? Like, everyone knows 2 fruit and veg, and 2 fruit, 5 veg, but that's only because that's pushed
in the general public.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
everyone thinks we're on the pyramid model.
The dietitian. Yeah, everyone thinks we're still a pyramid.
Absolutely, and it's plate, not a pyramid, and nobody knows that the difference.
There is a plate,
and even in the last, time that I've been a dietitian anyway, the last few years, it's actually changed in terms of the number of serves of grains, for example, to reflect, obviously.
Yeah, now vegetables are at the bottom of the Nutrition Australia pyramid, who did another pyramid.
So the confusion is rank, really, and if we direct people to that information at the end of the day, they look at it, like Tyson said, and goes, yeah, great, so what am I supposed to do with that? So when people are, coming in for meal plans and all that sort of stuff, obviously that's in the back of our mind, but I can't say that healthy individuals have come to me for me to then be able to say, well, look, there's our dietary guidelines, stick to that. Generally, we're working with a population group that are diseased or have some sort of issue with food, whether it be an intolerance, and so that's when we actually then need to modify those guidelines.
Yes, so I guess that's the difference of being a dietitian versus being a nutritionist, is that we can do that medical nutrition therapy. So being able to adapt the guidelines to suit an individual, rather than as a nutritionist, you're meant to follow pretty much the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating when you're consulting with clients, from what I understand. But
we certainly know that that's not the case, and that's completely loaded and maybe another topic for a different time. But at the end of the day, like I said, if actually people who are healthy stuck to that, then generally they'd be fine. Sorry, because there's a lot of background research that you don't see, which aim to try and make sure that every single recommendation had supporting references around why we should eat X, Y, and Z, as well as in the quantities. We should eat more green. We need to have green every day. We need to have orange vegetables every day. How much amount of meat per week should we have? Red meat. We should be having, at least no more than 500 grams a week of red meat, and then everything else should be distributed through that. And I certainly know that a lot of people don't understand that, and certainly have meat every single day. And certainly with grains as well, is that, carbohydrates are bad for me, grains are bad for me. We emphasize, high fiber and whole grain, but does anybody choose high fiber and whole grain? And obviously why we emphasize that as well too is because of the effects of that on our health. Taking that out of the food group, then obviously other things would increase too, and we haven't suggested that that's bad, but at the end of the day, coming to see a dietitian, you would then know that obviously if you're going to take something out, you need to be replacing your nutrients with something else. So as you can see, I'm quite passionate about this topic and it's just rolling off the tongue. So let's come back to the original question.
Yes, so the original question
is it good for me? Should I stick to...
It's irrelevant, but this is towards dietitians.
Yeah.
So if their client was to ask them that, what answer would you give in short, in summary of your rant?
Yeah, so if you're seeing people that obviously do not have any particular health-related condition, then definitely use the goals as a starting point. But make sure you talk them through the guidelines and serving sizes and make sure that there isn't any issues with that. If they're coming and seeing you and they've got a particular condition, don't stick to the guidelines, particularly if it's something like diabetes.
Weight management.
Weight management, big one, yeah. So diabetes and weight management are the two that I still think that they're not properly targeted for. And, in relation to things like the discretionary food category, which is terrible, and if you try writing that in a doctor's letter and them understanding what you actually mean, I think junk food or crap food or whatever would probably be better. However, we can't use that terminology
because nothing's junk, Peter.
Yeah, extras category. Yeah, that's right.
But I guess from my perspective, if I was going to use the guidelines, I wouldn't actually reference the guidelines. I wouldn't go, follow the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, because that's boring as shit. If you want someone to come back to you, they want to hear that you have your own knowledge. Otherwise, they can get it elsewhere. So if you're going to do that, use it as a guide, but use it in your head, and then talk through it. Have your food group serve sizes. It might be exactly the same as what the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating is, but don't feel like you have to mention it. Because if you have that confidence and they're coming to pay you, so use your skill and your knowledge to do it, rather than feeling like, I just have to follow the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating on this one. And then talk to
I find it's probably benefit with kids is kids and young children is the only time I kind of really do use it, because at that stage you're not wanting to manipulate or change or restrict their diet too much at all. And it can be a really good education tool for parents for them to understand, oh, really? That's what they're supposed to be eating in that quantity versus that?
So many more than me.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't realise that they shouldn't be having less than me. So that's probably the only time I do use it with good relevance.
Cool.
This is the end.